Good afternoon. My name is George Goodnow, and I'm with UT Southwestern's Office for Technology Development. Thank you for joining today's webinar, which is part of an ongoing series presented to the UT Southwestern community to provide educational and professional development opportunities. For more information about our series of webinars and to learn about UT Southwestern's technology development resources, please visit our website at utsouthwestern.edu/innovations. Today's webinar is entitled Startup Life, Is It Right for Me?, in which we will bring you a better understanding of the process of therapeutic commercialization, the elements of a successful startup, real-life experiences and case studies, as well as available resources. It's brought to you by UT Southwestern's Office for Technology Development in partnership with the Texas Medical Center and the Accelerator for Cancer Therapeutics. Our sincere thanks to TMC and ACT for facilitating this opportunity. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words about the Office for Technology Development. Our office supports and advances UT Southwestern as an elite driver of healthcare innovation and commercialization. Our office was recently realigned to streamline efficiencies and provide a better experience for UT Southwestern researchers and its external stakeholders. Through this realignment, we created 6 new commercialization success partner positions, as well as 2 new assistant director for technology commercialization positions. Through these positions, OTD directly interacts with faculty, principal investigators, and researchers to ensure a timely and customer-focused communication and collaboration occurs. OTD is working to accelerate UT Southwestern technologies through the commercialization process in order to maximize their societal impact. We look forward to working with all of you as we meet the needs of an increasingly complex research, technology development, and commercialization process that is required to advance UT Southwestern's innovative science into therapies that directly benefit patients. Finally, I would like to remind the UT Southwestern community that the deadline for our first ever startup pitch competition is fast approaching. It's an amazing opportunity for you to gain exposure and to the investor community, to receive entrepreneurial guidance, as well as coaching and refining your business skills. You can find more information about that on our website at utsouthwestern.edu/innovations, which you see up here on the screen right now. And I will now hand it off to Dr. Gao, who is the co-founder and scientific advisor for Onko Nano, which is an innovative oncology technology company founded on the campus of UT Southwestern. And additionally, Dr. Gao is the Elaine Dewey Simmons Distinguished Chair in Cancer Research within our cancer biology graduate program. And with that, I hand it off to Dr. Gao.
All right, thank you, George. Can everybody see my slides? Okay.
Not yet, but soon.
Okay. Well, let me get started. Thank you, George, for the introduction. Also want to thank the Tech Transfer Office to allow me to share the story of Onko Nano Medicine, the triumphs, as well as the challenges that we learned in translating basic research discoveries from the bench to the bedside in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I want to give a shout to Dr. Badowski and our institutional leaderships. I think the inception and evolving success of Onko Nano speaks to the translational vision by our leadership over a decade ago, and also the unique environment at UT Southwestern to enable collaborations between basic research scientists and physicians to achieve something bigger than the sum of its parts. So in this case, it's Onko Nano Medicine, which is a spin-off of UT Southwestern from its initial inception, technological innovation, and a clinical translation all happened here at UT Southwestern. For the namesake, is my slides up?
No, Dr. Gao, could you press that share screen button for us one more time?
Oh, okay. I'm actually okay to see it on my screen. Let's see.
There we are. Perfect. If you just want to take it into presentation mode.
Okay.
There you go. You're good to go.
All right. So for the namesake, Onko Nano really stands for our initial vision of transforming oncology by nanotechnology. This is a disclosure. I'm a co-founder and scientific advisor for Onko Nano Medicine. So I want to go back in history. Really, Onko Nano started with a conversation over 10 years ago between Baran Sumer, who's a head and neck cancer surgeon, and myself, who was trained as a chemist and bioengineer. I'm in the cancer center with a secondary appointment in pharmacology. So we really started to talk about how do we actually bridge, you know, in my case, physical science with the clinical practice. In Baran's case, he's a full-time head and neck cancer surgeon that's taking care of patients by doing cancer surgeries. And then the problem or the unmet clinical needs that we identified in cancer surgery is in you know, tumor visualization. In this case, I'm showing a video. Hopefully, not everybody's having lunch. This is actually a transoral surgery by a Da Vinci robots. That Baran is actually routinely doing surgeries in the clinic. So this is actually someone with a throat cancer, so that he can appreciate. It's very difficult to see what they are. This is actually where Baran is using the blue ink to label the boundary of the tissue. He's then resecting it and send it to a pathologist. And then the pathologist, usually each section is gonna take 15 minutes, and we'll come back and tell him whether he's has a clear margin so that he can stop cutting, or actually have, you know, positive margin that had to, you know, keep going. So we wanna figure out the tumor visualization technology that allow the surgeons to actually see, you know, the tumor, you know, in real time, to guide the, you know, precision in removing the tumor tissue without, you know, taking too much of the normal tissue. So this is a sort of a quick journey of Onko Nano. So we had the conversation back in 2010. We worked on a grant proposal, both for NIH. This is actually on designing activatable nanoparticles that stay silent in the circulation, but only turn on in the tumors. So we received the R1 funding from the NIH. But at the same time, we got our first CPRIT award on using the nanoparticles to guide cancer surgery. Just allow you to appreciate the time scale. It really takes a long time, again, for the idea inception, but we are successful in securing the federal and state funding. The next year, a graduate student, Tian Zhao, who is actually a senior director of R&D at Onko Nano now, Tian actually synthesized the first batch of indocyanine green conjugated nanosensor and performed the animal surgery by Baran using the image-guided procedures. It takes another 2 years, a lot of challenges. I'm pretty sure a lot of folks on campus may find that it's actually very hard to you know, take lab discovery into the marketplace. Part of the reason is that we're not trained as business professionals to learn how to raise money and how to organize a team together to overcome the valley of death. But in our case, we actually were lucky to find Ravi Srinivasan, who actually lives in the Bay Area, who has done several startups, you know, before Ravi is committing to us, and is really helped by our first CPRIT product development grants that we received $6 million. So we enticed Ravi to spend a significant amount of time in Dallas. That really get the Onko Nano off the ground. So in 2015, Ravi was able to negotiate the licensing agreement from UT Southwestern. A few years later, in 2018, we were able to raise $11 million from a group of investors. We expanded the platforms to a therapeutic platform. We actually started the phase 1 trial for Onko Nano. This is the ONM 100 in cancer surgery. And in 2017, the company also received close to $2 million in SBIR funding. Last year, before everything was shut down by COVID, the company was able to raise additional $23 million in Series A funding. They actually broadened the licensing of the nanoparticle platform from imaging to now including therapeutics, particularly in the immuno-oncology space. And then we started the phase 2 trial for the ONM 100. And then late last year, the company also received $50 million to develop the STING nanoparticle vaccine platform for T-cell therapy of cancer. So quick summary. So I guess in the last 10 years, we were able to raise $60 million capital. Find out that for any biotech startup, access to capital is hugely important to allow the development of these platforms and clinical evaluations. The company now has hired 22 employees. Most of them are here in the state of Texas. And then has a phase 2B assets in cancer surgery, and is developing several therapeutic pipelines in the immuno-oncology space. So I want to briefly talk about the technology platform that we just sort of innovated. And we had the opportunity to think about targeting different cell surface receptors and genetic signatures. But in the end, we decided to go after the metabolic signature. In this case, is tumor acidosis, as a result of close to 100-year-old finding from Otto Warburg, who is a German pharmacologist who actually really reported in the early days that cancer cells, even in the presence of oxygen, favors the, a fermentation or the production of lactic acids. 85% of glucose turn into lactic acids, which are exported by the cancer cells to make their environment, acidic. So this has been reported regardless of the cancer genotypes and anatomical locations. The metabolic acidosis is a universal signature with the literature reported value of average tumor pH at 6.8 compared to healthy tissue at 7.4. So initially, the small pH difference is really a technological challenge to visualize such a subtle difference between a tumor pH and a healthy blood pH. This is where we innovated the technology. I call this, really 3 Ps that's actually make any startups a lot easier. So the technology itself is a nanotechnology where we utilize the self-assembly and the phase separation to really sharpen the pH response. In this one example, you can see the nanoparticles on the left side. This is by TEM. In the nanoparticle state, it actually have a long circulation in the blood. The fluorescence is quenched, stays in the off state. But once it's in the tumor microenvironment, it gets turned on with 100-fold increase in fluorescence intensity increase or the payload release. You can appreciate that the pH transition is actually within a quarter pH, difference. This is actually much sharper compared to small molecular pH sensors. So essentially, we're designing a binary on-off threshold pH sensor, and this actually allows us to really differentiate the tumor acidic pH from the normal plasma blood pH. This initially we hypothesized should give us a versatility across a broad spectrum of cancers. because it's actually also can be used as a therapeutic delivery system. This is where the company now is using the platform to deliver cytokines and tumor antigens to turn that not only at the imaging system, but also a therapeutic delivery system.
Dr. Gao, we have somebody who has a question, if you have a second. Somebody's raised their hand. Jiawei, do you want to ask your question?
I'm very sorry. Sorry, I accidentally pressed it. Sorry.
No problem at all. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Gao, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions after the presentation as well. The presentation is not very long, so just want to keep it at a high level. So I think for many of the I think scientists, who are thinking about starting up a company, the 3 Ps are kind of important. One is that you want to have a platform technology, so that's broad and applicable, and you can get actually, very importantly, patent protection, because many investors they're not willing to invest big dollars until you have a IP protections, particularly on the composition of matters. And in the Onko Nano's case, or actually, Southwestern's case, we have 10 issued patents or full utility applications right now with the broad coverage of not only composition of matters, but also method of use. The other P is publications, because these are very important to be validated by the scientific peers. And also generates a lot of free publicity to help raise capitals in the early stage of company formation. And it's really a humbling experience starting Onko Nano, because quickly realized that for many of us who run the lab for a long time, and we really, it's a small business, we do it all, but to form a company, it really takes a team's effort. In this case, it really requires a CEO and the board to be able to raise a lot of capitals, because it's very expensive to take a drug into the clinic. Need a CFO to really help manage the finance, make sure we have enough runway to not really just get strapped, by the capital in the middle. Also need a lot of help on the preclinical toxicity, pharmacology, GMP production. This is actually Tian is making a GMP grade material, a lot of a Q and a QC to go along. And then we need, physicians and the clinical team to run the clinical trials. Not to mention there's a regulatory team to interact with the FDA, and also the marketing folks to really figure out the revenue, structure. And so there's really a lot of things going on. I want to share the clinical success. This is actually the phase 1 trial from patients with a tongue cancer. You can appreciate that this is actually the bright orange is actually the cancer that's illuminated in the tongue. You can see the teeth underneath. In the phase 1 trial, the surgeons are not allowed to use imaging information to do surgery. He actually switched over to the other side of the tongue, and just to appreciate that the off state is really off and it's very blue. So in the phase 1 trial, we had a 30 cancer patients trial, really demonstrating the universal characteristic of the technology, is that they tried 4 different cancer types in breast, head and neck, esophageal, and colorectal cancers. 100% detection of tumors identified by standard of care or histology analysis afterwards. And very interestingly, and more importantly, the imaging actually identified the additional tumors after the standard of care surgery in 30% of cancer patient population. So this could potentially change the course of treatment, after surgery, in staging, as well as, preventing a recurrent surgery if actually the surgeons can utilize the information to completely remove the residual cancers. As I mentioned before, the technology is not just serving as an imaging platform for image-guided surgery. The company has now get a lot of interest in, therapeutic, pipelines. The ONM 400, for example, is a cytokine delivery system, and also for small molecular drugs to protect them during circulation, minimizing the systemic toxicity, but only activate them in the tumor microenvironment. The $15 million reward we received from CPRIT is on the ONM 500 platform for developing a sting-activating nanovaccine with a current clinical indication on head and neck cancer and the cervical cancer. So having the broad platform was very helpful to really just garner a lot of interest and mitigate the risk in taking the technology into the clinic and raising additional capitals for proving the technology. So I want to mention that the startup is a lot of work. It's very different from, in my case, running a lab, and also in Bron's case from doing cancer surgery. But it's also a very creative process. You know, it really allows us to access a much more diverse set of expertise in the business world and legal and regulatory worlds. And I think it's really important to figure out a creative way to integrate all these expertise together. In this case, to make a bouquet of flowers that looks beautiful than the sum of its parts. There are very kind of quick lessons I want to share also is that I think the founders are really important to set the tone and the core value, at least in the initial inception of the company. So Bron and I guess when we started Onko Nano, I think our really focus is not really to get rich, but really to, I think, take the technology and the discovery and to do something good, for the patients. And in particular for Bron, he's a head and neck surgeon. He always, emphasized that he want to be the customer that will use the technology to help his patients. And I think that's actually keep it very real for the graduate students and the postdocs, in the lab. But as the company is being formed, I think it's very important for the founders to know when to step back, to let go and trust the experts, because there are a lot of legal documents and hundreds of pages and a lot of the languages we don't understand. You just have to trust, the professionals to take care of these things and to actually move to the finish line as quickly as they can. So my last slides, I want to say that really in the initial stages when we don't have the infrastructure in place or the ecosystem, we have to go to the Bay Area to find our CEO. I think it will get easier with the ACT program as well as the Texas Park. That's, I guess the news came out in Dallas Morning News a couple of days ago. This is a 23-acre hub for biotech innovation. And I think locally we have the tech transfer office. So we're really having a lot of initiatives to really foster the scientific discovery translation into the clinic and commercialization. We have a local, regional, and federal resources. So there are a lot of mechanisms that we can tap into to help, take a lab discovery into the clinic. So with that, I guess I will relay back to you, George.
Great. Well, Dr. Gao, I actually have a question for you related to the Pegasus Park Innovation and Accelerator Hub that is in the works and will soon be launched. Do you have plans to locate there when a scale up occurs?
Yeah, I think Onko Nano, our CEO, Ravi, I know he's in the process of talking to Claire. Potentially Onko Nano will be one of the first tenants, I think, in the, Pegasus Park space.
That's great. More official news is coming soon as it relates to this. UT Southwestern is certainly engaged as a partner in the success and the growth of this, and it's a really fantastic deal for the entire North Texas to bring together the venture capital community as well as nonprofits and as well as providing lab space and innovation space, and also the collision opportunities between innovators and venture capitalists and others to help generate more technology spinouts in North Texas. So we're very excited about that. And I will, unless there are other questions for Dr. Gao, I will now hand it off to Leah Damasco, who is the entrepreneur in residence at Texas Medical Center's ACT.
Thank you, George. It was the fall of 2018, and I was an executive at a biotech startup. I walked into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows on the 44th floor of a high-rise building. At the table along the wall, there were an abundance of snacks, sparkling water, an espresso machine, and across the room was a group of surprisingly friendly-looking professionals. That changed, however, after we got a few slides into our presentation. And I believe the statement was, your de-risking strategy is the biggest risk to your business. Unfortunately, that was not the last time that we heard this same message. Next slide. As you're all aware, and as Dr. Gao has just described, biotech startups are a very risky business. I've worked for a number of them over the course of my 12-year career in industry, and I've seen a variety of different approaches to managing that risk. At this particular startup that I just described, our approach was to create our own mini pipeline of products. So rather than what Dr. Gao was describing, a platform, we were establishing a pipeline that had completely different targets and each had a completely different indication. And the idea was that this would allow for more shots on goal and therefore de-risk the business from an investor standpoint. Next slide. Unfortunately, VCs didn't see it this way at all. They weren't interested in having us de-risk their investment for them. They were already doing this by investing in a portfolio of diverse companies and then tranching those investments based on the achievement of various milestones. So what they saw when they looked at us was a very small company with too many different assets that had absolutely no overlap or synergy. They were concerned that both the management team and funding would be spread too thin, and that the business model wouldn't really allow for the focus that's needed to successfully drive a complex drug development program forward. Next slide. This was a lesson that we had to learn the hard way. But had we had somewhere where we could pressure test our ideas, get input from experts in the field, run our business plan by the leaders of other successful biotech companies or VCs before we walked into an investor pitch, we would have fared better. And that's really the goal of TMC's Accelerator for Cancer Therapeutics, to provide an environment where budding entrepreneurs like Dr. Gao, like some of you on the phone, can learn from experts and get the feedback and education that's necessary to build successful companies. There's a lot that people can learn from making mistakes, but our hope is that participants in this program are able to learn from the mistakes of others so that they will make fewer themselves. The Accelerator is a 9-month-long, no strings attached program. And what I mean by that is we're not going to take equity in your company for your participation. All of the participants in the program will receive an education on the fundamentals of both drug development as well as the business side of a biotech startup. And participants will have access to our mentor network. Every company will walk away with a strategic plan that's specifically tailored to their company and vetted by industry experts. So by bringing together the right people and resources, it's our hope that we'll be able to catalyze startup growth and increase company fundability. Next slide. Our team, which is shown here, as you can see, is made up of predominantly PhD and MD scientists. Combined, we've worked for over a dozen different startups or large pharma companies, and we have extensive experience in drug discovery and development that we want to share with the participants in the program. Next slide. And we're supported by an executive advisory committee that's made up of industry leaders and investors. Next slide. So as Dr. Gao has mentioned, Texas has come a long way in the past decade or so with respect to the growth of our biotech ecosystem. It's growing, and while, like Dr. Gao had to reach out to the Bay Area to bring in a CEO, I think there's more of that talent pool growing here. And that's largely due to CPRIT's support. But given the breadth of amazing research that's taking place in this state, we can do more. So if you're having these conversations, like Dr. Gao mentioned, with colleagues of yours, or you're working on promising cancer research that you believe can be translated out of the lab and into the clinic, and you're interested in starting a company, or if you've filed an IP or invention disclosure with the Tech Transfer Office and you're looking for that team to kind of get it off the ground, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to you in more detail about the program. Applications for the accelerator will open on August 11th, and the first cohort will start in January of 2021. Thank you. And with that, we'll take any questions either on the program or for Dr. Gao on Onko Nano.
Looks like the first question has already come in. It's for Dr. Gao, and it says, it sounds like you had the perfect partnership between your platform technology and market need awareness. Did your company conduct a market analysis to validate the need for the application of this nanotechnology platform?
Yes, I guess the formal analysis was really coming more recently, I would say in the past 2 years at Onko Nano. I think when we first started Onko Nano, that was really our gut feeling that 85% of patients actually had surgery as a primary care. Brian is a cancer surgeon, and there's really no clear visualization techniques in the OR, so that the surgical market size, there are about 1 million cancer surgeries being performed in the US and 5 million surgeries worldwide. So we just, actually we killed several different smaller projects, but really decided to focus on cancer surgery as our the initial idea, to start Onko Nano. I think market and a potential clinical impact was clearly one of the considerations.
I think that was a great question, and actually that prompts me to ask a follow-up to that, Dr. Gao. You had said you killed other projects on the way. How many other research projects did you pursue before you found this one?
I would say probably 2 or 3, I think, and then these are all funded projects. And
that was directly with Dr. Sumer in your relationship with him, I suppose.
Right. So initially, really engaged Brian, not directly. So we had grants on developing nanoparticles for MRI imaging and for photodynamic therapy. So Brian was really the clinical collaborator and back and forth. He was actually on many of these grants together, but very quickly we realized that it's not directly aligned with his clinical interest, or maybe just the market is not big enough. There were quite a few projects that we killed before we focused on the surgical technology.
Well, also I have a question for you, and you talked a bit about your management team and the process of going through that and developing that, and how that actually has required a different skill set for you as well, and developed you in a different way. What are the keys to selecting a management team, and how do you get comfortable with that?
Right. I think that's very critical. I think number one is that we actually, before Ravi, we had, I think, an interim CEO. We actually have investors come in. They want to give us $1 million to just license the technology. So we said no, and there's a company who want to hire the whole management team for us, a local firm. I don't want to mention any names. They actually give a really favorable valuation for the company at the early stage. I think we said no to quite a few folks. I think part of the reason is that we want to find, at least in the early stage, a CEO who actually understand the science, because tumor metabolism and the technology is pretty complex, and to be able to actually understand the core science is very important for me and Baran. And also who had the experience, because negotiating the licensing terms with your office was not that easy early on. Mm-hmm. So one of our resident CEO couldn't actually get a term sheet, so a lot of things that are going on more than just innovating and developing the technology. So we sort of selected Ravi for several reasons. Ravi is actually a sort of MIT educated engineer, so he is very smart and understand all the technology, and before joining us, he actually has been in the startup business for over 10 years, so has a lot of experience. And then just hit it off. I think it's really important to enjoy each other's company, and you have a lot of stuff you can talk about. I think that's very important as well.
Okay. Well, we had another question come in, and I think Dr. Gao, this probably is something you can speak to as well as Leah, but I'll pose it this way. You had mentioned that when you were selecting your management team, you had received some offers that suggested a high valuation. Maybe that was different than your take on it. But given all that information that was coming into you at the time, how did you prevent yourself from getting overly diluted? And how did you pursue your strategy?
Right. That's very important because as a scientific founders, initially you're always doing a lot more work, and worry about dilution is always, I think, in your mind. I mean, it's a lot of factors, it's hard to say one thing, but sometimes it's really a lot of information that you process, and you come to a gut feeling, this is a guy that you want to spend time with, because the initial term we get offered a great valuation, and they have a full team, but the whole sort of a selection process, we're just don't feel very comfortable with, picking the CEO and the whole management team. We wanted to have a little more sort of organic growth to be part of the process, and not really just for preserving the capital, but is really just the decision-making process. And this is where I think the founders really set the tone and the core value and the process initially. I think we maybe benefited, from actually saying no a couple of times until we find Ravi. But it is sort of a lucky situation because Ravi is not here in Dallas. I wish we had the Pegasus Park, back in the day, and we can just meet a lot of, business professionals and, meet someone locally, but we have to go all the way to San Francisco.
Well, we at UT Southwestern look forward to the opportunity to help create other success stories such as yours. And I hope and I'm sure that Pegasus Park will play a role in that, in those collisions and introductions that can occur on the campus like that. Well, Leah, do you have any suggestions and recommendations about how early stage companies can prevent themselves from becoming diluted too early?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question. I think the strategy that Dr. Gao used of getting non-dilutive funding early on, so using grants, SBIRs to drive the research forward and create as much value from a data perspective as you possibly can before getting investor money is a great way to increase your valuation. But the thing I always like to say, I mean, biotech is, drug development is a very expensive business. It takes, as you've seen, Dr. Gao's raised $60 million and is not yet at the finish line. It takes an incredible amount of capital. So I think that founders should manage their expectations that there is going to be some dilution. However, 5% or 10% of a multi-billion-dollar market is still a very large number. So as long as you are moving forward and able to create value, then I think you should worry less about the dilution aspect.
Okay, great answer. Basically, create value, tangible value, and then it will be more clear as to what your value is. And Dr. Gao, here's another one for you. How did you find your CEO, Ravi, and did you use a recruiter? I think you may have sort of hit on that earlier.
No, we didn't. So Ravi actually found me, so we published the paper in Cancer Research that he reached out, and he's actually very interested in the therapeutic technology initially, and he actually formed a company based on that technology, but that one didn't go as far for a number of reasons. And then, so he didn't want to do the imaging company initially because the imaging market is a smaller market. And speaking to what Leah just mentioned, I think really the first $6 million CPRIT award really made a difference because so essentially I called Ravi. I said, Ravi, I know you're not interested in the imaging technology, but this is not just diagnosis, but this is actually surgical intervention, number one. Number two, we have a chance of getting, state to support the effort to start the company. So to Ravi's credit, he agreed to lend his name, as a business professional because one of the critiques we're getting from CPRIT is that he said, you and Baran are university professors. You guys don't know how to run a business. You need a business professional to lead the company. So I called Ravi back, and so he's actually wrote the whole business section, and that really helped with the non-dilutable funding to actually entice Ravi to run the business, for us.
Okay. And I would just like to add from a general perspective in thinking about forming your companies, that's something that we seek to help participants in the accelerator program do. So when a company is accepted or even outside of that, if they reach out to us, we have a broad network of individuals that we're working with, and we want to help put the right pieces together. So bringing in expert consultants to help with various aspects. And, CEO is a more challenging role to fill, but we're certainly keeping kind of a Rolodex of individuals that we can hope to slot into some of the companies going through the accelerator.
Fantastic. Leah, following up on that, here's another question. You weren't not part of yesterday's webinar, but you'll understand it from the second half of the question. Yesterday's speakers recommended having a good VC firm to guide you through the early stage. Is this a more common strategy than your situation with finding experienced CEOs?
I don't know that it's necessarily more common. I think if you have that opportunity, it can be a great resource. There are multiple different ways to obtain funding, and the VCs who invest in startup companies know the business. They know what works. They know what doesn't. A lot get a reputation as sharks, and maybe there are some that are that, but there are also a lot of good VCs out there. So I think if you have the opportunity to work with a good VC, then you should absolutely take that. I don't think that opportunity presents itself to everyone. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that opportunity, I don't think you should let that stop you. If you can find a CEO, then sometimes that person, similar to Dr. Gao's experience with Ravi, can then make those connections and get a VC on board. So I don't know if one's more common than the other, but I don't think either is a bad approach.
But would you say that through the guidance of a good VC, you will have a better understanding of when the appropriate time to bring on a CEO would be?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they can certainly guide you in that, but I think if you are an academic founder, having some sort of business input
Okay.
sooner rather than later is a good idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time CEO. It could just be a consultant that you're working with in the early stages. And then, from there, you can move into a more permanent CEO, and that can be guided by the VC. But I think what Dr. Gao mentioned is really critical to a successful startup, and that is having a good chemistry with the CEO and the management team.
Great. Dr. Gao, we have one more question for you. It comes in two parts, and then I really look forward to your answer on the second part. Can Dr. Gao comment on the financial return for creating the startup? And then secondly, what kind of support from the school did he find the most valuable?
Okay, financial return. It was actually very rewarding. At least I think seeing, a lot of that is in the stocks, of course, not really immediately paid out. But it's actually, I think does provide some consulting, resources that not really, pays that much, but definitely it helps. In terms of the school support, I think the school, I feel that is very, very supportive from the COI office, from your office, George, Dr. Claire Aldridge. It was very, very helpful in, I guess, negotiating the licensing, terms with the company. Is really just eyeing for the long-term relationship rather than, you got to pay, right now. But I think they're really try to be part of the process and part of the long-term sort of win-win situation with Onko Nano. So all around, as I initially mentioned before, that I think that probably speaks to the institutional leadership from Dr. Podolsky and Dr. Lee and Dr. Mark Neved. And, it really, I think it's been very supportive of having, I guess, a physician and a scientist, forming a team and potentially spin off a company to make the discovery more impactful into society. Excuse me.
Great, that's nice to hear. Thank you very much. One more question for Leah. And here we go. Leah, would you say that in today's environment, the edge of the valley of death is the proof of concept, i.e. phase 2 trials? That is to say, an inflection point valuable enough for a VC to become actively involved?
No, I would say it's much earlier than that, than completion of the phase 2 study. And as far as VCs becoming involved and even pharma deals happening, that is moving much earlier in the regulatory process. We're seeing even sometimes with preclinical stage companies doing pharma deals, depending on how exciting the technology is, or particularly if it's a platform technology that companies think holds a lot of promise. I would say, to get a VC involved as far as what you should have, number one, IP. So you have to have some sort of patent. But I would say from a therapeutic standpoint, in vitro and in vivo efficacy, you absolutely have to have. And the models that you use for that should be relevant. So, using the appropriate controls, not just a vehicle, the appropriate study design, and then having some idea about the safety of the drug. So, they won't be expecting that you've completed a full GLP tox, but, looking at the range of weight on mice and all of the organs, histology, et cetera, and making sure that there's no overt toxicity. I think that would be the bare minimum that you would need to get a VC involved. And, each VC will be different and it will depend on the compound and, or compound or molecule, whatever the therapeutic is, and kind of the novelty and the promise.
You said that you continue to see industry interest in early stage companies. Is there a particular focus or area of research that industry has a more interested in going in early than late stage?
I mean, I'm speaking specifically about oncology. I mean, that's the area where I, know the most, have spent most of my time. And I mean, like I said, it's really kind of platform technologies. There is a lot of interest if there's promise. I mean, immunotherapy has been hot for a while. I think it's maybe cooling off a little bit, but there's still a lot of excitement for that out there. Protein degradation approaches, so kind of PROTAC, or something like that model where you're not just inhibiting a target, you're completely eliminating it. So I think there are a few sort of hot areas that VCs like to see early on.
That's fantastic. I think we've answered all the questions. Are there any others? If there are any others out there, we'll give it another sec. But we're coming up on an hour. So it looks like we had one more pop in. Let me give it a look and see what we got. Another one for Dr. Gao. Dr. Gao, what do you think the major role of the founders during the development of your company? How to balance the time you spend on your company versus your lab? I guess I'll read that again. What do you think of the major role of the founder? Right, really, what's the role of your founders in your company development, being that they're either scientists or physicians, and how do they engage in the growth of the company formation?
Right. I think all these are really great questions. Again, if this is the last question, I want to offer that just, after this, I'm on campus and be happy to really talk to anyone who have all these, questions before taking their lab discovery into the clinic. So for Onko Nano, I think the challenge is really we're developing a nanoparticle drug. So most of the consultants or the experts in the pharmaceutical world, they actually don't quite know how to, take a nanoparticle drug into, the company and the clinical trials. So I'm pretty involved in the developmental stage. So we had the Nature Biomedical Engineering paper published. But to go from that composition into actually the first commercial product. So I am involved in polymer synthesis, characterizations, and then luckily, the graduate students, Tian Zhao, who actually wrote a whole thesis on indocyanine green conjugated polymer synthesis and nanoparticle formation and tumor imaging. So I think it became the second employee for the whole company, other than our CEO. So what I was doing, not really very much time consuming, but it was really empowering Tian to, sort of empower him to really provide the context, of additional knowledge of, because Tian has to learn all the other things with the GMP synthesis at the facility. And so Tian is really the key force, driving force behind developing ONM 100 into the clinic. And I think for me, I was able to become a little more strategic, not providing day-to-day help, but really when Tian has some questions that he doesn't know quite, of, I can relay some of the additional experience, because before Tian, we had quite a few postdoctoral fellows and graduate students working on the platform. Before, there are other subtleties in the synthesis and characterization. I was able to help Tian to actually devise a good, plan for GMP. And then all the discussions with the therapeutic development, so that helped out. So I think in terms of the time distribution, it's very important, because running a lab is a full-time job, especially when the NCI pay line is, single digit. So I think, maybe one lesson I can share is that if you could identify the lab member who's actually behind the key technology development, whether it's a graduate student or postdoctoral fellow, I think definitely ask them to maybe join the company. In this case, I'm actually very happy to see Tian. We didn't lose his talent to Northeast or California, but he actually decided to stay in Dallas to really turn his PhD thesis into the first clinical product. I think time-wise is going to be tremendously helpful if you can identify a lab personnel who actually can help take care of a lot of these technical issues.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that is the last of our questions. Let me see. Oh, Dr. Gao, we had one more come in for you.
All right.
We'll wrap it up with this. And actually, I think it's a great way to wrap it up. Dr. Gao, do you think any accelerator/incubator kind of setup could comparatively bring you faster to where you find yourself today?
I think great question. I think it could, to provide that ecosystem, for us, we kind of have to struggle quite a bit in the early days and, get the angel funding, the seed funding, the program and the CEO, the management team. And I think having an incubator, someone just like Leah said, because sometimes it's easy to publish a paper, but to form a technology, from a company around the technology, you really have to do a lot more preclinical validation. In this case, Braun, I think, has performed like over 100 animal surgeries before we really kind of sold ourselves to say, okay, we're actually seeing something very robust, very helpful. I think having an incubator in place, maybe the business expertise and the professionals to really say, hey, this is really exciting, but at the same time, we're going to do a little more, in vivo validation, not only just on the efficacy side, but also the safety is also as important. So I think having access to that knowledge, that experience will definitely help out.
Excellent. Thank you all. Boy, the questions that was our last question. So I appreciate everyone's time, and we are right at an hour. So I think with that, we can sign off, and we thank you all the panelists, Leah and Dr. Gao. Thank you very much for your time. And to all of our attendees today, we really appreciate you dialing in, tuning in. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be available also for the UT Southwestern community at a later time, which we will post. And I would lastly like to remind everyone to, if they have more information about the Office for Technology Development, they can go to our website at utsouthwestern.edu/innovations. That's innovations with an S. And there you can also find information about the upcoming UT Southwestern first ever pitch competition, which is a startup pitch competition that will provide our researchers, but anyone across campus that has a startup idea with an opportunity to gain insight and experience in the process of company formation. And also I'm excited to announce that we now will be having a cash prize award associated with first and second place. It's $10,000 for first, along with legal counsel that you'll be receiving, and $5,000 for second place. You'll get more information on our website, once again, at utsouthwestern.edu/innovations. And I want to thank the Texas Medical Center and the Accelerator for Cancer Therapeutics for providing this opportunity for us. We're really grateful and look forward to more opportunities to collaborate with our partners down there. And with that, I think we can sign off unless anyone else on the panel has something to say.
No, I'd just like to thank you for hosting us and for the opportunity, George. We look forward to working with the amazing researchers at UT Southwestern.
Sincerely our pleasure. Thank you very much. This is exciting. All right. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.